Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AutoCAD for GIS users webinar from OpenSpatial. What we'll be looking at today is focused on GIS users that's new to AutoCAD. So we're going to be focusing on how do you interact with the user interface. We can do more of a comprehensive overview, but the focus on this one is mostly for people that's new to AutoCAD, that's experienced with GIS in terms of tools so that you can more easily work with the system. My name is Johan Nel. I'm CTO of OpenSpatial. On the line with us, I've got Colin Hobson, who's the CEO of OpenSpatial. And we've worked together in a company that Autodesk subsequently purchased in the late 1990s. And so I'm going to ask Colin to introduce the company to you before we go into the webinar.
Thank you, Johan. My name is Colin Hobson, CEO of OpenSpatial. I'm based in California, and as a company, OpenSpatial has offices in Australia, North America, and South Africa. Let's look at our products, and just to give you a very quick overview before we dive right into the CAD for GIS. We have three main products, Muncis, and I'll go into each one of these, Enlighten and ACDC, so database-driven GIS, web-based geospatial portal, and validation and loading of CAD data to GIS. If we look at Muncis, I just show you a couple of screenshots so you get an idea what that is. But database-driven, so essentially we're taking CAD data and structuring that into features. Muncis provides off-the-shelf data models. It provides pull-down menus, rules-based data capture. We'll check things like directionality and automatically calculate inverts and relationships like that. Provides a wonderful editing environment where you can see attributes from the database linked to an entity like this water pipe selected here. Drop-downs with domain values and all of that. So a powerful editing tool where all the data that is captured is put straight into the database. So this screenshot shows a whole lot of mapped information, but you'll see the listings on the tables and on the left that show a whole lot of the attributes that go with that. So that's a complete set of sewer and storm data for a city. And obviously the data is in a database, so it's very easy then to run any kind of statistics on it. So if you point Power BI, for example, at a water network, you can look at stuff like, length by diameters and breaks over time and get all sorts of information there. And all the data that's stored in Muncis is using OGC standards, open tables available to pretty much anything that can connect to a database. Moving on then to Enlighten. Enlighten is our web-based tool. It uses primarily its data directly out of the Muncis and is set up to use the Muncis data schema as the default. So what this is now you're rendering that information into a browser, you've got layer control, you've got all manner of a depth of functionality that's specific to GIS with the strength in utilities, including water. And you can then, zoom around all the usual stuff, select things, click on that. You can drop down to get information on one or more. So here somebody selected an area and you get all the listings of data that's captured in Muncis. In Enlighten, you can also edit attributes. You can redline and you can print full resolution printouts. So a powerful tool. It includes some custom functionality, like here we can do a water sewer trace. So if pipe here is breaks, or has in this case sewer has a blockage, or we get to model what happens if we need to repair that, we can just in Enlighten select it and hit the trace icon. And on the right you see the panel, and then on the left you see the results of those impacted parcels, in this case for drainage into the sanitary sewer network. Or you can go in and do that on a water network, where here you can see it understands pressure networks, so it says isolate this valve, and that valve, which will isolate this pipe, but also highlights all of the parcels through their service connections and allows you then to model that, and we do block analysis, etc. Moving on to ACDC. ACDC is a as-constructed design certification product. It's all about the CAD side of the house, automating the creation of attributed data from CAD drawings directly into GIS. So it's a go-between and very powerful. And it does more than just ETL. ETL is where you already have data and you can translate it. This is about getting the data out of the drawing. So I'll show you a little cameo. It really starts here where we modify the way CAD drawings are drawn using absolutely standard CAD procedures, but standardizing on layers, blocks, attributes, and providing all of the blocks and attributes for the user to use. So people can then draw drawings according to a set of standards. And the reason we do that is because you need to be consistent, or you cannot validate and convert data if you get multiple formats and structures and layouts and everything else within that, particularly about the data. If data is just text next to a line in CAD, that's a problem. If it's on a call out or if it's attributes in a block, all of those make a huge difference to what you can do with it. So ACDC provides a fully customizable platform to deal with the CAD side of how you structure the data, how you draw it. Then in the middle, it does validation, and on the end, it can convert and push that straight into the features. And that way, somebody drawing with CAD can immediately draw and validate. And ACDC runs in the cloud as a portal and on the desktop. Same validation going on. But if somebody validates a drawing, it will return errors and it will show, you cannot give me a valve without number of turns if that was a attribute that you wanted, or a pit without a depth, or you can't give me a hydrant with no pipe on it. All of those are rules. They can be special attribute, etc. And they would get returned to the user in a drawing showing all the errors, marking them and actually flagging not only where they are, but what they are, etc. And then they could fix that and resubmit that. So if it's in the portal, simply drag and drop the drawing to that project in the portal. Validation runs, you get your results in a matter of minutes. So this person here, this is their portal. They've submitted 35 drawings that have failed and 15 that have passed. And that's about normal, third or fourth time it passes. But that's huge because now the person creating the actual data prior to construction is structuring and not only checking they provide the data, but it is structured using the domain values, the feature names, all of those things so that it's ready to go into GIS. Because it's in the portal, we can also put in a whole lot of notification workflows and groups so people can get informed when things change status from being submitted to accepted, etc. And literally from there, we can then do the ETL part, which is just push it straight into the GIS from the CAD drawing, which is easier. So you can go from start to finish in a matter of minutes on a drawing and have everything fully attributed. Yeah, we're showing the data in QGIS, but you'll see you've got diameters, materials, and part of the validation process is creating connected attributed networks for utilities specifically as rules that you can add so that you, for example, get all of the pipes segmented where there are short stubs between, say, a valve and a fitting. We even include that. Split that out so it's all ready for modeling. So there's a lot more power than just taking lines and throwing them over the wall. So that's ACDC, Enlighten, and Muncis. In ACDC also, we can output to digital twins and see those plans, which is useful, particularly in the design phase. And then from Muncis, we can actually also output into these. So what we're doing with ACDC is going from the drawing stage all the way to GIS and more. Thank you, Johan. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we ran a similar one yesterday, and there has been overwhelming demand for that. So we will be setting up two more, one for a bit more advanced. So that one will be more focused on tips and tricks, how to improve the process. And then the third one is how to use the GIS functionality within AutoCAD map to handle projections, things like that. So what we're going to be looking at then is fairly basically toolbars, menus, the command line, things like working with the units, how does layers and properties work, how does the selection mechanism work, because that's quite different to what you would normally do in a GIS environment, and then looking at some basic editing tools and snapping mechanisms, etc., that we'll be looking at. A little bit of background. AutoCAD was introduced in 1982, so that's quite a while ago. The first CAD system for PC, so that one ran on DOS, and here's then an example of a 5.25-inch floppy drive, double density. That was before it went double-sided, double density. Working on. So this would be running on a PC workstation. So this is after 1982. So this had an enhanced graphic adapter, 16 colors and running 640 by 325 resolution. So yes, we've come a long way in terms of computers. But yeah, so before that, you had to use mini computers or it was the drafting table. Now, everything in this DOS environment ran off commands. But if you know the commands, you could actually make the thing fly. And that was then part of the success of AutoCAD as a drafting tool. The first Windows version was introduced in 1992. Now, they then had a choice to go completely user interface, like most of the GIS systems did, or stick with a combination of user interface and command line. And the command line is still in the system today. So the reason why I'm covering this history is the command line is still there, and it is quite an important part of the user interface to really be efficient in the data capture process. So that's why we'll have a look at the command line. So within AutoCAD, in terms of the user interface, so there's a menu. So that is the older system. So, or the menu bar, command to activate that would then be menu bar. There's the ribbon. Then you've got the toolbars where you can then display a variety of different tools. You've got the command line at the bottom. And then you've got things like showing the coordinate system that you're working with, whether you're in model and paper space, all the AutoCAD settings. Some of the important ones would be, for example, your snap modes, that little blue bars that will tell you which ones are active, etc. And then here's an example of, now if you right click on any of those bars, you can then go and turn on some of the toolbars, etc., that you can then go and work with. Now, within AutoCAD, so AutoCAD started as one product, and then it was customized to certain verticals. So you've got AutoCAD map, there's architectural, there's engineering. So there was about 20 different AutoCAD products that they've simplified. So your AutoCAD license or AutoCAD with tool sets, so all of those things are tool set nowadays. The only other version of AutoCAD is Civil 3D, and Civil 3D include AutoCAD and Mat 3D, so all the functionalities around that. So in terms of working with the system, so here's your AutoCAD interface. So here we've got the menu bar. So if you want to do draw or modify, so you've got the opening. Now, also one of the little things in AutoCAD, you've got this, if you look at the icon at the top, so that has replaced a lot of what you would normally have in the file functionality, so you can actually get to the information. So open and save and export and print and things like that. So some of those base functionality that you can easily get to is in there if you haven't got the menu bar on. Now, in terms of user interface, as I said, if you right-click on here, you can actually then go and turn on different icons. So let's turn on our object snap menu. So there you can see the object snap menu, and I can go and dock it here. Now you'll see these little bars to move it. That's, you just go and grab it on that little line, and you can then go and snap that onto the toolbar. In terms of interface, you've got all your palettes. So if I've got something selected, I could go and say right click and go to properties, or I can just go onto the command line and go to properties. Now, one of the things that you see what Autodesk have done is they look at, do we remove the command line or do we make better use of it? So if you look at it, what it would do is actually tells you if you start typing what's going on, so we can actually go and have a look at the properties. Now, there's quite a few things that you can do. So there's, for example, transparency. So in this case, we can go and say, how transparent should it be? And then if you roll over to it, what it would do. So that if I go and say that is then transparent, but or they can then actually see through the toolbar. The other type of thing that you could also do is you see this little icon there. So you can go and hide it, and when you mouse over that, it will pop out or not. The third thing that you could do, you could anchor these ones. So if I'm going to say I'm going to anchor that to the left-hand side. So there's my properties bar, and if I hover over it, it would then, you can make it disappear or not disappear, or I could go and expand it and have it docked there always on the left-hand side. So all of the commands and menus and tool spaces, etc., that's how you interact with them. So there's no such thing as a standard AutoCAD user interface. You can totally customize it to what you are comfortable with, and that's typically the process and how AutoCAD users do it. So there's not going to be a single or a simple way how everybody would look at a user interface to work with it. And so there we've got the properties. Now, once again, in here, I'm going to go to the command line. I'm going to dock my command line, and you can then easily, if you want it bigger, you can do that. The other thing, if you want to see a history, you can hit F2 and it will then give you, here's your command line history. So if you want to see. So the command line is your friend in that it's giving you a lot of feedback on what is happening. What's this history in the command? This is where a lot of the feedback is going to come of what is happening. So if I go and say, I want to go and draw a line, specify a point. Now, what you'll see there, you could actually go and make something selectable in the command line, and it would work for you like that. In terms of help, if I go and hover over a icon, so that's erase, and you keep on hovering, it will then actually give you a user interaction on how that is. And if you then hit F1, it will take you to the help file. And what it would then also do is give you some context to erase the object, and it will give you more information about that and about correcting a mistake or restoring a lost option. So it's a cute one saying, oops, and it could restore the last one. So yeah, it's fairly interactive and intuitive user interface. Let's have a look at your units. We'll go and have a look at that at the moment. Now, few things in there that, okay, that's your unit. So you've got feet, US, USC, survey feet, so, but you can go from nanometers and angstroms, very small units, to light years and parsecs and astronomical units, so whichever way it is. Now, one of the fundamental things to take into account when you're coming from a GIS environment, the GIS environment typically work with the feet or meters, and it is all about the spatial location, so earth size units. Whereas from a CAD environment, it was originally designed for engineering drawing, so people would be working at 0, and drawing up plans, etc. on that, but it does support that you can actually go and work in the right units in the area that you are working in, so within your right map projections, etc. So typically in there you've got a length and precision. Now that precision is not what gets stored, it is what gets displayed. So if you've got too many decimal places there, so if you've got 9 decimal places and you look at the display to say what's your coordinates, you'll see there it will actually give you a not too helpful display. So if we then go and say, let's make that 4 decimal places, then you can actually see a proper display unit in there. Angle and degrees that you can use decimal degrees or degrees minute second. You can go and set clockwise to measure positive angles in the clockwise or anti-clockwise. And then you've got your scale units, so is it feet or meters, or what is your insert units, and then you've got your direction control. So if you're capturing by bearing and distance, what is the base angle? In this case, it is anti-clockwise, so you can, is it east, north, west, south, so you can swap what is the 0 direction that you are working with it. You also have then drawing units. Now that is because you may get information from another, let's say from an engineering company, and when you're inserting it, if you've got feet that worked in meters or vice versa, you may have to scale the information. So what that will then tell you in this drawing I'm working with, what is your insert unit? So is it inches, feet, millimeters, centimeters, meters, etc. So you can go and set that, and then match your insert units to drawing units. So if you've got somebody that's given you something in meters and you want to insert that into feet, it would automatically do that translation for you. So there may be a few other settings that it would do. Is the decimal display, what's your linear precision? Do you want to scale the objects from another drawing upon insert? Yes or no. So if you want to do that, make sure that that is set to yes, and match insert unit to drawing unit. It will then do that for you, and then it would automatically scale the drawing when you insert that. AutoCAD, so very basic drawing line. So you can draw it from the draw menu, you can get it from the toolbar, you can get it from the ribbon bar, or you can on the command line type help. So that goes back to the information. Now, with AutoCAD, typically there's many ways to do the same thing. So different ways of doing it. So it's all about different people have different workflows and different ways of working, and it's then adaptable to your process rather than saying there's one way of doing it and this is the only way to actually do that. So there are many ways of doing things in AutoCAD that you can work with. So just to go back, if I go and say I want to draw a line, I'll indicate that, indicate that, indicate that. What this will then give us, there's a line and there is a line. Now, if I then go and say I want to draw an arc, so I can then go and draw an arc. Now, one of the things, this is from a mathematical point of view. So when you talk about an arc is not a line string. The arc is an arc, so mathematical arc. So in certain GIS systems, the arc is defined as a line string, which it is not. It's a mathematical. So just in terms of terminologies, you'll see those kind of things happening then in here. Now, if I go and look at that, that is a single entity. That is a single entity. If I go and draw a polyline, what that would then do, that's a single entity. And if I now go and do that, we'll see now that is one entity itself. If I go and say I want to draw a polyline, I can do a line, and then in the user interface, I can go and say, all right, now I want to go and draw an arc in there, and to carry on, let's go and then draw a line from that. And now you've got then one entity consisting of lines and arcs in combination. You could also go and close that and create that then as a closed polyline. So the way that this works, so there you can see there's an attribute to say that is it closed, and if I go and change that attribute, it will actually close that and make it a polygon in that sense. Now within AutoCAD as well, if I go, so there's a command called explode. So if I go and explode that, what you'll see, that's now a line entity, that is an arc entity, and that is the line entity. So you can actually build things on top of each other and explode, and it will break down into its consistent parts that we are working with now. Drawing basic AutoCAD objects, so within the command, so there's things like you can do polygons, points, rectangles, circles, arcs, multi-line, block, hatches, etc. Now, if we go and look in terms of drawing tools, so if I go and say draw line, if I want to go and say let's go and draw an arc, now mentioned that there's many ways of doing it. So because it comes from engineering, so there's 11 ways how you can actually draw an arc. There's 6 ways how you can draw a circle. From a GIS perspective, we recommend you stay away from splines and ellipses. It just mathematically makes it quite difficult to handle in the GIS. They're typically in there. There are so many ways of working with that. That's where then circles and arc, many ways of drawing the same type of thing. Now, if you look at text styles, if you type style at the command line to get the text style dialog, now what you'll see, there's then different styles that you can name. So you can create your own styles, etc. You can create a font and a style. Now, AutoCAD in the days before Windows and TrueType fonts created their own fonts, and those fonts still do ship with the product and is maintained, and you can create your own styles as well, but you can also use TrueType fonts if you so wish. So on that one, the compatibility that AutoCAD has is actually quite amazing. They've taken the product from DOS days to Windows, 16-bit to 32-bit to 64-bit, but the compatibility is amazing. So Within AutoCAD, there's 7 different programming languages. So there's Diesel and Lisp and Net and Object, ARX, etc. And there's Lisp routines, for example, that we wrote in the late 1990s that's still working in the product today through all of the iterations. So in terms of compatibility, what Autodesk has done with the product is, I think it's unparalleled in the industry. You can go and set the height, set the effect, so you want it upside down or vertical, what's the word factor, and then you can then save it as a new style that you can work with. You can determine what is, or go and set it a style to current, or you can delete styles out of the drawing as well. So to then place it, you just go to the text icon, or you can go type in the command text or just T, and it will then automatically go and say which one do you want. And so multi-line or single line text that you could then work with. So what you'll see then, we also have all of these. What does all of that mean? So that is just your justification. So you've got L for left, C for center, right. So that's just at the bottom of your uppercase symbology. If you then have letters like P or Q, etc., that will go to the bottom. So that's then bottom left, bottom center, bottom right. That's the middle line of it, mid left, mid center, mid right, top center, top right. So there's 12 different alignments that you can then go and do. So what it will then ask you, place the point, or you can type in the coordinate, and then it will ask you, do you want the angle? If you just hit enter, it will pick up as a straight line, or you can then go and enter the angle, or go click on the angle, how it would align with entities. So really easy way to actually get your text to align with entities. In terms of the navigation tools, you've got all the various zooms that you can work with. Once again, the things that tend to be used a lot is there. So what I'll do is, if I go and look in here, if I type in Z, then it will then say, now what's all the various options. So zoom all, zoom center, zoom extents. So if I go and do zoom extents, what that will do is it will go and look at the join entities in here and zoom to the extents there. If I say zoom all, what that is, if there's anything at 0, 0, it would then include the 0. So the command line tends to be a lot quicker if you get to know the command. So once again, now you can type in the command line, or you can start typing anywhere in the screen, and it will start to give you. So these are, for example, different. If you want to use the zoom wheel, you also have these icons that you can turn on and off to do that. So fairly simple within AutoCAD. If you just use the scroll wheel and you place wherever the mouse is, that's where it would then be the focus to zoom in. Middle mouse button take you into pan mode. So that's 90%, 95% of you would actually interact. And then zoom extents is then the easy way to get to the extents of the drawing. You can then also have the pan. So there's different pans. So there's 6 different pan modes that you can work with. Now, AutoCAD working with data. So there's a few things that we'll be looking at there. So the way that AutoCAD work with layers is different to how you would work with a GIS layer. So typically in a GIS, you've got a layer which is tied to something in the database or to a shapefile, for example, or a geodatabase that you'll be working with, and you then make one layer active, and that's what you are working with. That's the layer that you would analyze. If you need to do 2 things across different layers, you need to combine them to work with it. AutoCAD gives you access to all of the things at the same time. So, for example, when I'm working with something and let's say I'm going to draw a line, and what you'll see there is now snap mode. Now I can snap to anything it does. It's not only on that particular layer. So you've got all the various snap modes that you can work with that you'll do there. So there you can actually say, I want to snap to an extension of that line, and it gives you the distance and the feedback that it is giving you in there. So we'll have a look a bit more at all the various object snaps that you have a little bit later. So to get to the layers, so what we'll do in there is, you can see there, I've got a layer properties. You can also, L was for line, LA is for layer. That will do that, or you can have there's your icon for it. What that would then is then turn on your layer so that you can do. So once again, you can dock this, you can minimize that, etc. Now there's quite a few things that you would see here in the layers that we can work with. So if you want to see that tick mark, that would actually then make a specific layer active. So if you're now going to draw on it, and if I then say go and draw a line, it would now go and draw that line, but all the layer entities is still available to you. But now there's a few different things in here. So there you can actually see the status of the layer. So that green tick is saying that the layer is current. If it's got that blue highlight, it says the layer contains objects. Or if it's grayed out, the layer does not contain objects. So that's a show layer usage system variable. Now there's a whole heap of system variables in AutoCAD. We won't go into that. Contains object and property override in a layout viewport. So yeah, there's a whole heap of different things that it can give you there. What's the layer list? So the layer names that you're working with, so you can sort and drag and modify, the display of that, how you want to see that. The next one is your on-off control. So what that is doing is turning a layer on and off. So you can still have data on there. It's just not going to display that. So when it's on, it's visible and available for plotting. When it's off, and it's not going to be plotted, even if it's in the plot, it is turned on. So, okay, makes sense. But then you've got freeze. So what's the difference between on, off, and freeze? Now, freeze will freeze the selected layers. So if you do a regen, so in AutoCAD, because it is memory-based and not disk-based, it will, depending on if you've got zoomed out a lot and you zoomed in, you can actually refresh the screen layout. So that's a command called regen, and it will then refresh that layout. So if you've got a lot of data on a screen, and you don't need to work with it, let's say you've got property and water and sewer data on there, and you just want to look at one specific set of the data, you can go and freeze some of the other layers. You don't have to delete that to get the efficiency, and that would then freeze it, and the drawing will be much quicker to work with. So it's that if you want to remain visible or invisible for a longer period. Now, on off, you still have the information available to access programmatically. Frozen will also take it on there. But that's not all. As they say, there's then also a lock. Now, what lock will do is it will lock it so you can modify it, but you can still see the data. So typically in a GIS environment, you would make a layer active, and that's the layer that you are working with and that you're going to interrogate, etc. That's in some ways similar to then what you would do with lock, and it will slightly gray out the data so you can see what's locked and what's not locked. You can still snap to it, but you cannot modify any of the layers that is locked. Plot controls, I'm not going to go into detail on that. Color, we can specify colors for different selected layers. Now, if I look at the color, and let's just go and have a look at that. Now, there's index colors, so there's certain 256 index colors. You can then also have true colors, and do you want the hue, saturation, luminosity model or the RGB model that you can work with. You also have color books, so in terms of all of the Pantone colors are in there. So in terms of plotting, there you can see all the various Pantone colors that you can work with. So in terms of color reproduction, you can be very exact in what you need to provide. So that's quite an advanced set of functionality that is available in terms of colors as well. Line type control, so you can go and select the line types. There's also a whole, you can go and create and modify your own line styles as well. Line weight is just in your line thickness, etc., that you can work with. Next thing that we're going to do is object selection. So the way that AutoCAD works, and I'm going to go back to that, so let me get rid of there. Now, normally what people first off when they go and do is you go and start to click to start the selection, and then this happens. So that's what they call it lasso, and you can then, well, why can't I select the stuff? So typically how you would work with selection in AutoCAD is you would single click, will then and leave the mouse button. So now it will give you, you're now in a selection mode. Now you'll see the color change there, and so I'll talk about that then in a moment. But then you have to select, you can then go and select there. But now what you'll see there at the bottom, you can also then have these options. So if I then want to go say, okay, I want a fence selection, so that is, I'll draw a line there through that, and it will select the stuff that is crossing, so you can get into the various selection modes. So window, crossing window, window and crossing polygon. So remember we saw that there's the blue and the green bit. So if you start at the top left and you'll draw your mouse to the bottom right, it will only select that stuff that is completely inside the window. If you go from bottom left to top right, so the green one, it will then do a crossing selection. So that would then select all the stuff that is inside that box. If you want a window polygon, so you can then just go and draw a polygon around the stuff, or a crossing, so you can have a window polygon all inside, or a crossing polygon, everything that crosses that, and it will then select all the things that is inside. Or the fence selection, or then that lasso that we were talking about, so that's the freehand selection. So once again with that lasso selection, so if I keep my mouse down there, you can see it will do the blue thing. If I keep it, if I go the other way around, it would do the green thing. So this would then give you all the crossing, or this one is then completely inside. So you can see the different actions on there. Now, if you want to modify an object simultaneously using different commands, and so let's say you've got a whole heap of things selected, and now I go into a different command, and the selection is now gone, and you now have to go and reselect. Well, if you just hit P for previous, it will actually restore your previous selection. You can also select the object you've created for last. So that is then when you're asking to prompt for selection, it will then type in last, type in L for that. Now, so yeah, if I've got the entity selected, it will say there's my properties. So once again, if let's say I've got this selected, or if it then prompts you for selection to say, I want to go and move certain things, it will then prompt you for select objects. So you're now in selection mode. So that's something to get used to is, okay, I'm now in selection mode. It's now asking me to select which objects. And so I can then just go and say move. So there's now one object found. So that's the previous one that we had selected. Or if I've got multiple things selected, I turn it to move, you can then go either that, or if I've started the command itself and it prompts me, I can just go and say previous, and there you can see that is then what is selected. On the last object, now if you've removed that last object, it will be the one before that you've created that it will display. If you actually, you can also do the shift to add and remove the selection. Now, one of the things that we typically do and that you can remove from a selection set or shift to create a selection, so you can add to the selection set fairly easily. Now, typically what we do in there, so in terms of the AutoCAD user interface, it's something I'd like to look at. And so you can look at your options. So if I, on the command line, just right click, there you can see you've got your options. So there's a whole heap of different things in there. There's just two things I'm going to cover there. If I want to go to colors and I want to go to more the GIS, or I prefer to have a white background, you can then just go and select that as a white background or black background. So fairly easy to do that. You also have then in your selection mode, you then have in there, by default, it would be like that. So if I select something and I click on something more, it will keep on adding to the selection. Typically, one of the first things that I do is I would go to the selection and then say shift to add to the selection so that you're working with that one entity. And if you want to then add things, you just hold shift and then you can add to your selection. AutoCAD blocks. Now, typically in the GIS environment, symbology is done by something like a font or something like that, or you could do pictures, etc. Now, the AutoCAD block is in essence a mini drawing with all of the same things. So if you've got, for example, a hydrant or a valve that you want to display, you can actually go and draw up a little valve symbol and then save that as a block and reuse that all over the drawing. So it's a single entity that can be moved, copied, and rotated. So like I've shown you there with explode, so if you've got a polyline that I can go and explode, you can do the same thing. So a block is then a group of things that you can then handle as one entity. So that's a drawing symbols, that's a reusable, that you can save time. And the reference is stored to once in the drawing, and all the references are then referenced in all the other places. So if you modify the block in a drawing, all the other ones will be updated as the same thing. Now you can also add attributes to a block to store different information. So those are then called attributed blocks. So if I go and look in here, and so this is an example of a block. So that's the same block, but there you can see we've got attributes for that I'm looking at the property pane that you can then go store different information on. So things like invert elevations, etc. There's some common commands, block, W block. So export a block or write it to an external file, insert, explode a block to its separate components. I'm not going to spend any detail on creating blocks, but there's a lot of different functionality. So quite a powerful tool that you can use in terms of creating the blocks with different insertion points, etc. Now, grip editing. So when you select entity and you see these little blue bars, that's then a grip editing that you can work with. So that's actually quite a powerful thing. So you can stretch, move, rotate, mirror, etc. So just do a very quick one. So if I've selected one, you can see that is now available. So there if I want to say, okay, I want to lengthen that by 3. So it will then lengthen or shorten depending on where you've got that. Now, what I can also do is if I've got 2 entities selected and I go to that grip, I can pick both of them up at the same time and it will modify both of them at the same time. Or in this case, I can move this whole lot together within those grips so that you can work with in there. So yeah, a fairly powerful set of tools. Now, what you'll also then see in here, you can see a block, and then you've got that other level. So this one that little flat grip, you can then, I want to go and add a vertex to that, or I want to move that particular vertex to a different location, or I want to convert that to an arc, or I want to, let's move that back to a line, or if I go back to that to say remove that vertex. So quite powerful what you can do with the editing tools. Editing AutoCAD objects, so you can copy from one point to another. You can copy with array. So let's say you've got a parking lot and you've got the parking lines that you want to do, so you can draw one and then copy it as an array with the offset. So quite easy to do that. Move from one point to another, rotate, scale, stretch, trim, fill it to a radius. So you want to do this straight lines through or as an arc, extend the line to another line. So quite a lot of different functionalities there. Now, working with coordinates, so you've got absolute and relative coordinates. So relative coordinates is offset to a last point. So if you say, I've got a property boundary, you can give it the start point of the absolute coordinates. So you type in, this is the right coordinates that we have. But now we know this next one is 50 feet. So you can then specify a relative coordinate. So the next one is 50 feet. You don't have to work with specifically the absolute coordinates. So you can mix and match depending on the information when you have. So absolute, you need the exact position. Relative, you put an at in front of it, and then you can do the offset on there. So there's an example to the origin. When you do absolute, you just type that in. So -3 to 2, etc. And then you can do the offset of this. So I'm not going to go into too much detail to the selection point. So that's some of the information, or how you can actually then draw the offset. Function keys, so there's a lot of them. If one, expand your history, object, snap, etc., that we can work with. So the last thing that we want to look at is the object snaps, to specify precise location on objects whenever the command is used to prompt with a point. So if you look at the OSNAPS settings, so you can snap to endpoint, midpoint, center of a circle, geometric center of a circle, polygon, a quadrant, extension of a line, insertion, perpendicular, and nearest, apparent, intersection, parallel, etc. So you can choose which one of those do you turn on or off. So yeah, there's all of that. There's also the OSNAP toolbar, so you can say, okay, I want to snap to this or to that. So just a very quick one. If I then say, I'm going to draw a line, and if we look at our toolbar now, I can turn these on and off. So let's object snap settings. So what I'll do is to say, I'm going to do snap to insertion point or to midpoint. So I've got a few of those active. So if I turn on my snap, now what you'll see there is the snap mode is on. If I hit the tab key, it will then say there's a snap to that intersection. It will then go through the various snap modes. You want to snap to the midpoint of that line, the end point of that line, the end point of that line. So it looks at your corresponding data, and you can then go and snap to. Now, what you'll see, I've got entities on different layers here. So that is on pitch layer, that is on pipes layer, this is on a property connection layer, but you can then snap to any of these entities that you work with. So you've got a lot of flexibility how you want to work with it. So that's in terms of how you work with snap modes. Then you've got the snap mode toolbar. So in terms of then using this snap, so it gives you these symbols that's then explained. So if it is the end of a line, it's that square, or the center of a circle, that is then that, or of an arc, it will then give you the snap. So yeah, it's just interpreting these symbols, how that would work. Right, I think we're at the hour, so thank you for your time.